Here's my water cycle diagram. Here we go. I'm going to start off by drawing the setting. Everyone watch how I draw the setting. You need to draw it the same way. Very simplistic. There's my mountain. There's some land. Here's the ocean. Here's some more land. Alright, I'm going to draw underneath the land. So there's... Alright. And then here, I'm going to draw a tree. Because we need to have a tree on here. Here's how I draw my tree. Alright. It has to be big enough because we're going to draw an arrow going up through there. And we have to label what that arrow means. Don't worry about it. It's an exaggerated drawing, so it's easy to see what we're pointing at and labeling. Okay? Diagrams are often exaggerated, so you can clearly see what labels are pointing at. Okay? Alright, so now I'm going to label it. Alright? Here's the ocean. Alright? I'll just say it's land. Here's land. We could also say this is a mountain, but it's irrelevant. It's just land. Alright, here's more land, but it's clear. Here we go. So water evaporates, and I show evaporation using a squiggly arrow. You guys know you're being video recorded. They can pick up you talking. So the water evaporates, and it rises in the atmosphere. So here is evaporation. This squiggly arrow is evaporation. All right. And as it goes up into the atmosphere, it cools down and condenses, forming clouds. All right. And so this is where condensation is happening. The clouds move along, and when they reach an area where they need to get to a higher altitude, or they picked up a lot of moisture and they're too heavy, it'll rain, snow, hail, or a combination of that. All right, that's precipitation. That's the basics. Evaporation, condensation, precipitation. But that's not it to the water cycle. There's more than that. Those are just the basics. That's what you learned in elementary school. I can go beyond that. Okay? After there's precipitation, there's water on the ground and it gathers. Okay? It gathers in streams, and it runs and flows in streams and rivers. And those streams and rivers, that's called runoff. That's surface runoff. Okay? All these little streams that join together to form one big river, those little streams are called tributaries. Some of that water that's on the ground seeps underground. Alright? And this is called infiltration. Infiltration means to break through, so the water's breaking through the ground. It's going through the ground. Another thing you can think about here is filter. The water is seeping down to the ground and being filtered. And as it goes underground, sometimes it fills in these areas where there's a lot of water already there. This large body of water underground is called an aquifer. Okay? Make sure you have that drawn and labeled. I'm going to draw another aquifer right here. because the tree is going to need it here. I'm going to label this one as well. You don't have to label this one. You only need to label one of them, but I'm going to label it just so you know that that's just another aquifer. Okay? And this tree has roots, and the roots go down into the ground looking for water. And so what's happening here, water gets absorbed by the tree, and the water goes up through the tree using capillary action. Capillary action is where the water tension allows water to pull itself up through materials. Okay? Now, if you took a piece of paper towel and dipped it in a beaker of water, the water would go up through the paper towel all the way to the top. And you're not dipping the whole paper towel in, just the very bottom of it. The water would go up the paper towel. Even though you didn't dip the paper towel, the whole thing in there, it'll all be wet eventually. Okay? Same thing happens with the tree. So water is going up through the trees through capillary action. All right? And there's one more thing. When the water gets to the leaves, those leaves release that water through transpiration. As they transpire, kind of like when we perspire, we lose water. Our bodies lose water when we perspire, when we sweat. Trees do as well. They lose water when they transpire through their leaves. Okay? And that water gets evaporated into the atmosphere. When you guys sweat, your water that you're losing gets evaporated into the atmosphere. You guys ever do something like you're playing basketball or something and you're running around a lot and you get sweaty? And then you sit down, you cool down for a while, and you're not all sweaty anymore? Where'd that water go? Into the atmosphere. It evaporated. Okay? So that's transpiration. So I'm going to draw those squiggly lines with arrows. Transpiration. Make sure you have all that. It's all done. Now, I'm going to show you the water cycle. I'm going to show you. Here's what's going to happen. This is the atmosphere. Oh, you know, the atmosphere is kind of dirty. Let me get rid of all this pollution.
Yeah, stupid pollution. Get out of our atmosphere.
This lid from one of my pans in the kitchen is the atmosphere. Okay? Yeah, it's hard to get rid of all the pollution in the air once it's there. You know? Alright. And what's going to happen, the beaker water, that's the ocean. It's evaporating. Okay, you can see the water vapor rising. And what's happening is that it rises into the atmosphere, and then as it rises, it condenses and forms water droplets, creating clouds. So there's condensation creating clouds. Now those clouds, you're going to see they're going to move over, and they are, when they get to an area where they're forced to condense even more, like up against mountains, or they've just gathered way too much water, and it's way too dense, it needs to lose that water, and it precipitates. So it either rains, snows, or hails, or a combination, which we call sleet. All right. And you'll see that when it does, it'll rain, and the water. Oh, it just did. The water will land on the ground, and it'll either hit the ground and be runoff, surface runoff. You know, those streams on the ground and whatnot. Or it'll hit the ground and it'll absorb into the ground. Okay? So, if it absorbs into the ground, it joins the other water underground in an aquifer or underground flowing water, underground streams, underground. And that's what the sponge represents. Sponge represents the ground where water absorbs into the ground easily. And the hard table surface is areas where it doesn't absorb in the ground, kind of like the street. When it rains on the street, it doesn't absorb in the ground. It gets run off into the gutters and down into our sewer systems. Okay? So, Now, when the ground is completely absorbed, it can't absorb any more water. It's called supersaturated. When it's supersaturated, it won't absorb any more water, and the ground will flood over. We've all seen pictures of floods, seen it on the news. Some of you have seen flooding in fields near your house or at a park or whatever. Okay? All right, so as you can see here, again, water vapor is rising. It's evaporated from the ocean. It rises up into the atmosphere, condenses into clouds, and then the clouds are moving over, and it's being forced out. It's raining right over here. All right, and I'll make it rain even more obvious.
There's fresh water. Thunderstorm.
There's a big storm right there, right?